Welcome back to Purple Easel Spotlight, where we put the spotlight on artists and creatives. My name's Latoya.
And I'm Megan.
And we're both art instructors here at Purple Easel, the world's largest paint and sip studio. Today, we're going to be talking about MC Escher. And I have something to say about this. I did not know a whole lot about MC. Do I call him MC or do I call him Escher?
Escher. Okay. Although kind of like MC had the vibe.
Yes, definitely. When I was back in high school, I saw this and I was like, super dope, love him. I always thought and assumed he was a psychologist turned artist. And I'm finding out he was not a psychologist at all. But I feel like his art is very psychoanalytic, if that makes any sense.
It is. So the thing that I find really intriguing is he really used geometry in his work, which is part of why a lot of mathematicians kind of call back to him. But it's in a way where he blurs the line between what's possible and what's actually buildable.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it could exist if gravity didn't get in the way.
Yes. Didn't he go to school for architecture and decided to do art?
I don't know offhand, but that kind of checks out.
We're going to Google. So we went to Google and found out that, yes, his dad was an engineer, which is also very mathy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did go to the School of Arts and Design.
Mm-hmm.
And he went there and he's like, Dad, I want to become an artist instead.
But Dad was really happy.
I'm sure he was not.
He should have been, because Escher actually made a really big impact on not only the art world, but the math world, because he bridged that gap, just like it did for me the opposite direction. A lot of mathematicians and like science publications would feature his work.
Oh, wow.
So Escher actually traveled quite extensively, and he took a lot of inspiration from that traveling. In fact, a lot of his early work was scenery. Places he was going, and then he started to kind of manipulate the perspective a little bit and made things a little bit more interesting, started to explore, but you can definitely see a big change from when he essentially stopped traveling and started working in the studio, because it becomes more singular at that point. And I think Hand with a Reflecting Sphere is a really good example of that.
Yes, I agree. And it probably stems also a little bit from his metamorphosis style, because he was at some point taking an image and transforming it into something completely different. I kind of feel like that's what's going on here with Hand with Reflecting the Sphere. He did get a lot of inspiration from traveling and architecture and structures and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I think this is such a poignant self-portrait. Like, you don't normally see self-portraits like that. It's normally
Not at all.
a dude sitting there. And I say dude, not that women don't make self-portraits, but dudes totally,
Yes.
had the art world for quite a while. So, but yeah, it's just so interesting to see like the distortion and how long he would have had to sit there with that, right? Like,
That's nice. I've never thought about that, but yes, it would take a very long time. But it is stunning. It's one of his most popular works.
And you can tell, like, just his power of observation to be able, because there's a mathematical component to it, but he's not graphing that out on a computer. He's looking at it, and he's looking at it so intently that he can translate it into the paper in front of him.
Yes.
Insane.
So definitely, when he really, really, really got mathematical with his tessellations, tessellations are essentially tile or repeat patterns that repeat and repeat and repeat, and they just are like almost forever. They go on for forever. And
think of your bathroom tile.
Yes, repeat patterns essentially. And they're a little bit hypnotic almost in a strange way.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of tiling, a lot of tessellations. He did this on a lot of lithographs. Lithographs?
Yeah.
Lithographs.
Lithographs.
Linoleum.
Linoleum or lino cuts.
Oh, yeah. Lino cuts.
Yes, lino cuts. Way easier.
Way
But it's made out of linoleum. Yeah. And that process is actually really cool. Have you ever done a lino cut?
Yes, I have. It is So fun. It reminds me of almost screen printing with like graphic with shirts and stuff, except you obviously got the paint and you roll it on.
Yeah. So you basically use a little tool and gouge out the linoleum to create a relief. It's almost like a sculpture. Yeah. It's kind of like drawing meets sculpture. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then you just roll it on there and make your little print. A lot of artists will do limited prints and they'll number it in the little corner. So if you ever see that in the corner of an artwork, like 1 out of whatever, that's because it's a limited run, and then they will probably destroy the original after that and never make any more prints.
I had no idea.
Brings up the value.
Oh, wow.
So with his tessellations and a lot of his lino cuts and stuff, he actually took inspiration from scientific diagrams of crystal formations.
Nice.
So it's more of that marriage of observation of the natural world and then broken apart into a kind of a mathematical formula in order to repeat it and play with the different planes. In fact, a lot of the names of his older work just talk about it's like plane exercise or whatever. He's talking about manipulating all of those aspects of the plane.
Wow. I think if he were alive today, he would very much be into sacred geometry, which is like in the spiritual world. But it's very much seeing in the natural world the way either the planets work or just seeing how a flower works and seeing these repeat patterns kind of going over and over. And it's very mathematical in a way.
The golden ratio.
Yes, very much.
So not only did Escher get influenced by all this stuff, he also influenced a bunch of mathematicians. So there was a father and son duo, the Penroses, and they saw an exhibition of his, and they really started to think about creating the impossible object. And so the son developed what is referred to as the Penrose staircase. And you can see it, it's talked about in Inception, which awesome movie, by the way. But you would probably recognize it if you saw it. But it's basically manipulating the perspective to allow for a staircase that's basically never ending. And correction, I think that was the father. That was the father after the son created the triangle, impossible triangle. My mistake. But so they created these and it got published in some mathematical stuff. And then Escher came across it and was very intrigued. And so then Escher was in turn inspired by them and created more works, which we're going to talk about right now.
Oh, wow. I feel like just in general, that's why I thought he was a psychologist all this time, because this stuff is what you see in your dreams. It's just like a never-ending staircase or just something that just is like the infinity symbol. It's just something that's just continuous and goes on forever.
And we take it for granted now.
Yeah.
These are images that we're just used to seeing, but somebody had to come up with it at some point. And yeah, it's just really cool how they basically flip back and forth and inspired each other the whole time. So you can see in his creation Waterfall the use of the Penrose triangle, and essentially he's manipulated the perspective so that the waterfall is flowing down but then travels back up, and it's so cool. Like I don't know how you think about that stuff just based on this little diagram that some dude drew and then create this out of it.
I'm baffled. Words. I'm like,
talk about art that makes you think. And then his other work is Ascending and Descending. And this one is actually quite famous as well. It's very similar to Relativity, but it's the staircase. Basically, just the staircase on the top. And then it's just fleshed out to this whole thing. But the fun part for me on this one is the little figures, the monks. Like, there's one dude just chilling, kind of looking like, look at these guys walking around in circles. What are they doing? You know, like, it's just so funny to me. He just puts these little nuances in there.
Oh.
I bet you didn't notice him, huh?
Not really. So I feel that I've been heavily inspired by him without really knowing a lot, because my personal art is very pattern heavy and just, again, pattern heavy, and it just goes on forever, and it can get bigger and smaller and bigger, and it can get wider and like longer, and that's kind of how I see the things when I'm drawing my own personal art. So I feel like I need to give him his props personally, like through my soul, because it was really him that was driving me to make my patterns, or like inspired me to make my repeat patterns. I love patterns. And in fact, I think our next artist that we want to highlight has a lot of those.
She sure does. So our next artist, Tanya Heidrich, is synonymous with patterns to me. She will literally fill up sketchbooks with just patterns. And the coolest thing ever is watching her stories on Instagram, because she'll just show, you know, pictures that she takes from the plane while she's traveling. And then a few days later, all of a sudden that is translated into a pattern. And it's just super cool to me. She does the same thing as Escher and takes things from around her. One of which is manhole covers.
That's pretty cool. I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, I wouldn't have thought.
Right? It's so beautiful, but you would never think that that's like on the ground leading to a sewer. But I gotta say, the European manhole cover game is way better than ours.
This is actually very true. Well, this is my stuff that I like. I don't know. I just looking at like I'm in a trance. So that's how I feel about patterns. Is I don't know if it's just me, and when I teach here at Purple Easel and it's something that's repetitive, I always tell people it's gonna be relaxing, and some people are like, "Boo, it's not. No, actually, it's not." But to me, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again is relaxing.
It's a zen.
It's very zen. I can definitely be one of those like workers that like just put a cup somewhere and put a lion person that's why I like to pump paint here.
Honestly, I like doing brush sets for the same reason. It's kind of that moment of okay, and then just do, you know, and working through it. And then you have instant gratification because there's something accomplished right in front of you.
Yes. That's how I feel about this particular show.
This is great to me. Not only is the line use really dynamic, because you have like the really thick lines kind of in between each shape, but then each shape itself is pretty irregular. It works just like the tessellations. They somehow all fit together, even though it doesn't automatically look like it should.
Yeah.
And then all the little tiny details. I can't imagine how long it takes. And the fact that she just fills up sketchbooks with these things.
That's amazing.
It's insane.
I like it.
So even some of her earlier work, I would like to say this is probably a self-portrait, but it doesn't expressly say it. It does kind of look like her.
Yeah.
But it emotes such a feeling. And there's all the tears coming out, and it's so chaotic, and all those tight little lines as where the face and everything is so stylized and like stripped down. And it kind of gives a meaning just in the line use that she chooses.
Yeah, I agree with that. In a way, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it or not, but it almost, I don't know. This is how I feel. I feel like the tears are, and each individual tear line is an emotion. I don't know. That's hard for me to explain. I feel it like in my soul. It feels like those in like the detail that each individual tears represent something. It's just it's
all coming out.
Yeah, it's all coming out. But like we have a bigger picture, but there's so many little minute feelings and thoughts, and that's all coming out, and each line individually shows. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it.
So I'm going to take a little aside because that totally made me think of how we view art. So you mentioned like, I don't know if it's meant to be, but that to me is the exact beauty of art, is whatever the artist intended could be whatever, but what the viewer reads into it is expansive. It's infinite.
It's very true.
The act of viewing art is such a transformative experience, and I don't think most people realize it. And it might be totally on a subconscious level, like Escher inspiring you, and you're not even realizing it until you look at it and you're like, oh, dang. This has been happening all along.
That is very, very true, because a lot of times, and sometimes it is, and it's the reverse, to where we just throw in a detail and then someone will look at it and be like, yes, you meant to do that. I see it. And you're like, oh, sure. I just threw the little line in there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Some things have no intent, but they have meaning to somebody else.
Yes.
It's beautiful. So like many of our artists, you can see kind of a progression through Tanya's work, and she really stepped it up by putting patterns onto murals. And it's cool because, again, in her stories and stuff, she'll show doing the inside of a coffee shop or, you know, just some random street art. But she actually participated in an art festival in Pompeii and created this mural, which is so evocative of Escher.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
But in its own right, just so cool because you go from like the negative, and she was inspired by like the ruins of Pompeii, slowly transitioning words into the positive, where the city has been kind of rebuilt, and you kind of see that entire history in this one image, which at a glance is completely abstract. Again, it's kind of putting more meaning into the art, whether it was intended or not.
Yeah.
But I just think it's such a beautiful, simplistic kind of approach.
Oh, no, I love it. I love everything about this. Again, it's just those repeat. It looks like it just goes on forever. I love how it's just black and white. And it very much makes me think of those, I don't know, in elementary school, I had one of those 3D books, and you like move it a certain way, and it
Magic Guy?
Yeah, and it kind of pops out. But it was like the repeating pattern that was behind it. It reminds me a lot of that, in fact.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And you mentioned how just the black and white really makes it. And I think there is something to be said for that. Because when you work in high contrast, just black and white, everything becomes so much more meaningful. Every line you put is either creating value or a sense of space, and it just becomes like really stripped down, and your composition has to be spot on.
Yes, I 1000% agree with this as someone who just also does black and white art and patterns. The negative and positive space for me when I'm creating mine is essential. The composition is essential. However, there is something to be said with the thick lines and the skinny lines, the thin lines and the thick lines, and how they all are used in the space that's given, as well as like the negative and positive space. It has to like work together.
Yeah, it's very intentional.
Yeah.
I feel like intentional is the right word. And you can totally see that in the other piece she did during the Pompeii exhibit. Is great because she actually shows little pictures of where she took the inspiration. And then it becomes just like relativity, where perspective is kind of morphed. Are you looking at the foreground, the background, the upper level, the lower level? Like, who knows? It's kind of that geometric twist on things.
Yes.
I love art that kind of makes you
Mind bend.
think and like have to look again. That's the mark of a true artist to me. Like, they make you engage with their work.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So I kind of want to wrap her up with this one image, and to me it speaks volumes. And she did it as a self-reminder, and it simply says draw more. And I think that is such a great message. And it doesn't have to be draw. It can be any sort of create. It could be painting. It could be, any medium. But just taking that reminder to yourself to put yourself out there, to create things. And
it reminds me of like, just do it.
Yeah, it does. It's so simplistic, but like it has so much meaning.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing, and this happens so much in our classes, where people have this expectation.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And what you have in your head as an artist, as just anybody doing something, doesn't always translate. And so you get frustrated. I think there is like this self-deprecation because that translation doesn't happen easily for people.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to strip all that away. And it's when I finally became comfortable with my art, is when I realized whatever I pictured doesn't matter anymore. Once it's there and it's complete, it's whatever that person sees. They don't know what my original expectations are. They're seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
And that is magical to me.
Oh, yeah. No, I say this in almost all of my classes, and I wanted to grill this in. So when I first started working here at Purple Easel, I was, obviously teaching paintings. But I saw the trend that you're talking about when people are like, oh, I can't understand. I don't see it. They don't see their end result just yet. So I give them a heads up like, hey, don't do that. Yours is going to be different than the next person because we're all specially unique human beings. 2, it is a journey. It is not going to automatically just turn into this great masterpiece 5, 10, 15, an hour from now.
Yeah.
You literally have to wait. And people hate waiting till the end.
Yeah.
And at the end, then they're like, okay, I see. Some paintings that we teach here, and you can see it formulates pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Others, you literally have to wait till the end, and people get frustrated, and then you have to keep reminding them, just keep going. It's this awkward teenage phase of the painting. We'll have to see it through. But I just try to grill it into their minds that it's going to look different. It's not this person who created this masterpiece. You're going to create your own.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally creating something. The canvas was blank before, but it's hard. I understand, but it's something I grill into them before we even get started, so they can get a heads up on that.
Yeah, normally at the point where everybody's got the water wash on, I'm this is the last moment. Everything's gonna look the same, but that's all right because we're individuals, and when we create, we put ourselves into it, and we're all very different. So of course our art's gonna be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I also try to drill that in as well. But I think it's very interesting how the moment, and it's normally for our paintings here when a silhouette goes in.
Yes.
Suddenly everything comes together and they're all oh, this makes so much more sense now. Although I have to say it was a very interesting experience doing our secret painting where we didn't have the original there.
That was fun.
And it stripped away all the expectations.
Yeah.
For some people, I could see that being stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're willing to let go enough,
yes.
People were so into it.
Yes.
They loved the shock and awe at the end of this is what we created, even though we just created it. How it was supposed to look. But I think
it strips away that expectation.
Yeah. And it's even when they're taking pictures at the end of a class, I like them to take pictures of all their work without ours in the background. Because then it's just their work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the original was. It's about the process. It's about what you can take home at the end of it and the sense of accomplishment you have as a person, as an artist, whatever.
Yeah.
It's an achievement.
It is. So we definitely want to encourage all artists out there, and I definitely want to talk back to Escher and who is it?
Tanya.
I was going to say Tanya. I didn't want to make sure I was saying it wrong. Because they're both very textile. They're both very pattern heavy. And because I'm the same way, growing up, I knew I was an artist, but I didn't make Monet type stuff. I didn't make what was traditional and normal. When people think of art, they think of Renaissance pictures and stuff like that. So for a long time, I didn't think, I was I don't know what I am, but this is an art. Anything can be an art form. So I want to let anybody out there who was thinking how I used to think that you weren't an artist because you make a bunch of pretty patterns, that's still very much art. And we definitely want to just encourage creativity of all kinds.
I mean, somebody out there has to design tiles and clothing and all the things.
Yes.
I mean, if there's ever a commercial art, it's probably patterns. Relating to patterns.
Yes.
I need a new bedspread. Somebody had to design that.
Yes. Agreed.
Patterns. You're everywhere.
They sure are. From all of us here at Purple Easel, thank you so much for tuning in.
Make sure to check out our artists in the links below, MC Escher and Tanya Heidrich.
And join us at purpleeaselplus.com to paint with the world's largest online painting sub-studio.
And if you visit Southern California, be sure to check us out. Come paint with us. In the meantime, create more and create often.
Bye.
Oh!
I got a balloon.
Thank you.
Wow. I feel so special.